Good afternoon to everyone that has tuned in, and welcome to another edition of the exciting GIBS Flash Forum. By way of introduction, my name is Silas Matlala, adjunct faculty here at GIBS. I teach and facilitate in the areas of marketing, sales, business development, and customer centricity within both the academic and executive program space. And for today, I am joined by Karin Chenne, who is Chief Growth Officer at Kantar. Kantar is the world's leading evidence-based insight and consulting company. The focus is on understanding how people think, feel, and act, and they do this locally and globally, spanning over 90 markets. They do this by combining the deep expertise of their people, data resources, and benchmarks, innovative analytics and technology to help business clients understand people, consumers, customers, so as to inspire growth. Now, ladies and gents, the impact of COVID-19 on all facets of our lives and businesses, and the recognition that we are now entering a new normal cannot be overemphasized. COVID-19 has and truly impacted on everything that we do and how we think. First, there was social distancing, then a total shutdown, which has since been extended. And we all do appreciate that the repercussions of this will certainly be felt long and after the lockdown has been lifted. Previous presenters on this forum have touched on various topics as they relate to COVID-19. These topics included strategy, the new world economy, decision-making, workplace diversity and inclusivity, and so forth. In today's session, we focus on my favorite subject, marketing. How can marketeers navigate COVID-19 and its impact? Why marketing, I hear you ask? Well, to create context, we subscribe to the notion that at its basic level, marketing or marketeers seek to continuously identify customer needs through various forms of customer research, then put together an offering or what we term a service or product customer value proposition that meets the identified customer needs. We then make sure that customers know through communication and advertising about our offer for their needs, and most importantly, how they can access the offering. Most importantly, we then deliver on the value proposition, and through various matrices, marketeers evaluate their efforts continuously. With this in mind, the question then is, has marketing as we know it changed forever? If yes, what has changed? How so? How much? And what is the impact thereof to respective categories within products and services? The quick answer is yes, things have changed, more so than we would like to believe and comprehend. And how should marketeers respond to these changes or the shifts? Now, that is the most pertinent question. Today's presentation and discussion aims to provide marketeers, entrepreneurs, and business owners with a toolbox of how to respond to this new order. It covers everything from realignment of needs, expectation from brands, communication messages and channels employed, and how marketing-oriented businesses can organizationally adapt to these shifts. To help us navigate and make sense of these shifts and their impact, I'm going to hand over to my guest, Karin. And for the purposes of continuity and time limitations, may I request that you send questions through the chat functionality. Karin and I will then respond to these questions at the end of the presentation. Over to you, Karin.
Thank you, Silas, and hi, everybody. It's good to be with you this Wednesday afternoon. Thank you to GIBS for the opportunity to share some ideas with you, because I think we're all grappling for ideas on how to get through this, to think out the box and to make it happen for our brands and for our businesses. So yes, I don't think any one of us would have imagined that we'd be here today in this world which is actually closed. So Kantar has put together a program which covers over 50 markets. 45,000 consumers have been interviewed across the world to really understand how people are feeling in this very unusual and difficult time. I'm going to share a lot of those findings today, as well as some other findings we've got from other markets and some learnings that we can hopefully inspire you into actions that you might wish to take going forward. So what we know for sure is that for consumers, it's unlikely that life will just go back to normal. As time goes by, the changes can become more severe, and people will, and most likely as the longer things go on, downscaling becomes more of an option. For business, even more so. Many businesses have seen upswings in demand if you happen to be in certain categories, but most of us are experiencing severe downswings in demand. And this is leading to already we're hearing announcements of organizational change. And so we need to be responsive to the market needs and to understand how consumers are shifting and what we can do as business to adapt to that. On the good news side, though, is we've got some learnings from lead markets that have been through this, ahead of us, like China. And this is some data from our Chinese market, which shows that it's taken about 6 weeks for consumption data to get back to the same growth rates as what we saw a year ago. Bearing in mind that China went into lockdown in their peak demand season, which is Chinese New Year. And so obviously they were very badly hit, up down to 40% down on sales. But we're already starting to see that for most categories, life is returning back to some sort of consumption normal. But overall, our perspective as Kantar is that we shouldn't be just taking knee-jerk reactions. We need to look at things holistically. What are these consumer shifts? What does this mean for our category? What does this mean for our brand purpose? What do we need to do differently as an organization to be more effective? And how do we adapt our channel and shopper processes? And we believe that we need to put together as businesses a set of actions that are for right now. What are the plans for as we come out of this? How are we going to do that? And then ultimately for the future, because we do not believe that things are going forward. So today I'm going to take you through 5 shifts, which we feel marketers need to consider. Definitely a renewed respect for essentials. We're seeing that there's a new sense of shared humanity, and brands need to be far more conscious of societal impact. I'm going to give you some tips on media and creative and sort of watch outs, looking at the impact on omnichannel, and lastly, how can our businesses change the way they do things to be more adaptive? But if we start off with wanting it all to a renewed sense of valuation of essentials, what we see is that if we take a step back to the good old Maslows hierarchy of needs, we're seeing that those basic things that were just taken for granted are now actually seen as treasures. Food, safety, family are far more important. Some of the things that we may have been valuing in terms of self-actualization, esteem, etc., are actually being deprioritized. And it's almost socially unacceptable to be longing for some of those things. And as brands, we need to understand this. And absolutely, our survey shows that 53% of households already believe that their household income is going to be fundamentally affected. Bearing in mind, our survey is a connected sample, so people that have got access to the internet, either by mobile or by internet. We can imagine that those that are living in even tighter economic conditions are going to be hit even more hard. So as marketers, we need to find ways to continue to drive demand, but to be more sensitive to the change that people are going through. What we've done is we've just sort of given you some sense for how categories are being hit. We're seeing at the bottom side in the physiological space that there's been unprecedented demand for things like food, beverages, stockpiling, medicine. People who have never bought a hand sanitizer have been stocking up second to none. And who knew we'd be having toilet paper wars? We've seen, obviously, with clothing stores being closed, apparel has been hit quite hard. The restaurant industry is really suffering. Alcohol, I mean, I think South Africans are suffering quite heavily in that regard. But certainly at the top end, things like gyms, wealth management, out-of-home entertainment, travel, these are really hit extremely hard. And the question is, how long will they be hit for? In the survey, we actually asked people, have there been any sort of major decisions or planned purchases that you've postponed? And we see certainly those that were considering holidays over this next period are already delaying them. But other categories are also being delayed. And the question is, will people bounce back once we come out of lockdown? Will these delays just stay for longer, a couple of months, maybe into the next year? That's the question we all have to ask ourselves. Our overall opinion is that certain categories are going to continue to benefit from this. Telco, demand for data, demand for connectivity, and people have experienced new ways of connecting is going to continue to be an important part and way that we love and connect with one another. Nutritional supplements, looking after your personal health, your financial health, and making sure that you're medically safe is going to be very important. And we do think that sanitizers and germ prevention type products are going to continue to see boosted demand over the next weeks and months. The luxury category is the one category we're already seeing in China is still hit quite hard. I think that as there's less money in pockets, it's going to continue to be affected. And also there's some kind of a, let's call it a mindset shift that's making people question, do I really need that? What is really important in life? What we do encourage businesses to do is to continue to be as agile and creative as possible. And we have seen numerous examples of this in place. We've seen our alcohol manufacturers shift their focus to be able to adapt and pivot their production lines to produce hand sanitizers to support those in the healthcare industry and just generally where needed in businesses that are still operational. We've seen a new sense of collaboration that's taking place across businesses. No longer is it only about compete, compete, compete. There's a more openness to partnerships, to working through major issues in your industry and becoming allies. We've seen here the retail industry really stood together to see how they can overcome and deal with the demand and as well as the health concerns of their customers. And here's an example from Lifebuoy where they actually mention just use any soap, Lifebuoy, Dettol, Lux, Protea or Sunlight. So I don't think you would have seen that some 6 months ago. So I think for each of us, we need to see, is there a way that we can pivot the way our people work? I saw an example this morning of Capitec adapting branches to be call centers, etc. And adapting what we do to better meet the current needs and demands out there. And I think what's really important is I think that the value equations for most categories are being reviewed. And how can we do more for less and be more resourceful in terms of how we meet our customers' needs? The next trend is really about this new era of shared humanity and also a need for brands to show greater societal impact and concern for societal impact. Less about selfishness and more about selflessness. And what we see is that people are extremely anxious. 82% of South Africans are actually really concerned about this. And in particular, they are more concerned about their financial health than their physical health. This is really a tough time for all. And I think that whatever we do as marketers, we need to always have that at the front and center of our thought processes and making sure that we're sensitive in our approach. What we see is things that have always been amongst us have actually been scaled up, and we have a new sense of shared humanity. That spirit of Ubuntu is living far more greatly than it was in the past. And consumers are expecting a greater spirit of generosity, simplicity, and general well-being. The sense of connectedness and community, people have started to have a greater understanding of the hardships and sacrifices that others go through on a day-to-day basis. I guess the greatest impact that we're seeing for brands and for categories is that we need to focus less on the functional in terms of our brand communications and far more on our societal impact. And major brands around the world have been understanding that for years. Brands like Unilever have put a purpose-led approach, companies like Unilever, I should say, for a number of years, and that's been driving their success in many categories. And we do an overall survey called Brand Z, which values hundreds of thousands of brands around the world. And what we see is that those brands that have already been making an effort to make a positive difference in the world are outperforming the market by 175%. That's in terms of their financial performance on the stock exchange. So if we need a business reason to do this, that surely is one, I would say. Let's look at how some companies are actually doing this. We're seeing a lot of wonderful ideas. We've seen sandparks offering daily game drives. We're seeing live stream concerts. We're seeing online fitness classes. People really just adapting to finding ways to support people's physical and mental health during this lockdown. But if we really want to get it right, is how do we take a category leadership stance? As an example, I guess a CSR initiative is quite simple for most of us to implement, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that, especially in the localities in which we operate. I think that's a good thing. But if we really want to dial up our impact for our brands and our businesses, we do need to look at new business models. Can we introduce new ways and channels and touch points to reach our customers in a more relevant way? That'll give us greater impact. And then if we can really own the category leadership stance, as we see here with Discovery, who has introduced the Dr. Connect virtual sessions, this really will lead to their long-term success and incremental growth in the category. They are setting a new tone. I guess for each of us, it's how we show up tomorrow. We need to demonstrate shared values. We've seen DSTV making wide ranges of content channels, news, sport, kids, etc., available at no charge just to ease pain as people are sitting at home with their kids and whatever, and where money might be a bit tighter. We've seen initiatives like Ubuntu Beds coming in to help the hospitality industry and to connect up the dots between the healthcare industry and where people are needing safe places to go. And brands like Starbucks, who are recognizing that their staff are also under a lot of emotional pressure and offering mental health support. So I think each one of us needs to demonstrate how we are aligned to these new values that are definitely coming through more strongly in our society. Make sure that you are the connector. Find a way to facilitate and add value to the new tribes and the new ways of thinking. A spirit of generosity, what can you bring that just brings a little bit of light and upliftment, and find creative ways to connect with people. And understand that people are being more thrifty and find ways to support that resourcefulness as brand. Let's look now to media and creative, because I think there's a lot of us that are asking questions. Do we go off air? What should we do with our ads? What do we do when we can't produce materials? How do we get through this period? And what we see from our survey is that only 3% of people are saying, we don't want you to advertise. Advertising is a part of life and people appreciate it for what it is in terms of creating demand. However, because budgets are under pressure, we do think that fresh thinking is required. Some of the feedback coming from people are, advertising takes my mind off worries. It gives me a sense of normalcy. It makes me know that businesses are fighting for survival, that they are trying to get demand for their products and keeping people. And there's also an entertainment factor. So we must bring that into our minds. From the survey, we see that what's very clear is consumers, if you take this difficult period and are seen as opportunistic, people will take you down, right? They don't want to see brands exploiting the situation. They want to see authenticity, people really responding and doing their best effort to show up in that positive and more collaborative way. And I just want to remind you just how important creative actually is. We know from many, many studies that the thing that gets you the most value from your media spend is having good creative quality. So if your creative is not relevant for the now, it is worth reconsidering if you change to a previously used asset that was working well for you in the past. And just in terms of creative pointers, here are 6 learnings that we've had from across the world. The first thing is, just because it's Corona lockdown does not mean you need to reference it. If it's relevant to your category and there's a natural build, do include it, but don't feel like you have to. Don't be obsessive about everything being about social distancing. There is a place for just upliftment and giving a good positive spirit about your brand. You can use humor if it's appropriate to your brand, right? Nando's has been doing that through this because that's relevant to the way that they do things, and that's their brand ethos. But if it's not normal to your brand, don't do it. There is a place for functional messages, but please always remember that people feel first and think later. Otherwise, we just recommend continue to brand build, focus on your brand purpose, remind people what you stand for. And wherever you can, display solidarity, togetherness, but please don't disappear into the sea of goody-goody sameness. In the short term, what we are seeing is a huge uptick in terms of, because people are at home, they've got more time, they're spending more time online, they're spending more time watching television. We've seen people saying, I'm watching 42% more TV. They're streaming more. They're playing mobile games, and there's an opportunity for esports for many brands. We're seeing radio showing a 30% increase, and streaming for the first time showing a lot more of an uptake. So I think we need to think out the box about how do we adapt our media plans to stay in touch with our consumers, but taking those more in-home friendly options. Particularly when it comes to choice of channels when you go for TV. We've seen the big increase in TV. Some data coming out of satellite is that news is up 200%, kids shows are up, local movies are up, lifestyle and culture, and general entertainment. Sport has been affected, especially initially as there was no live sport. But what we're saying over time is that people are happy to watch sport reruns. I personally live in a household where my husband is watching old golf matches, old rugby matches, old soccer matches. I just don't even want to be near the TV. It's not relevant to me. Remember radio, a wonderful opportunity to connect really creatively because there's time now, and we know that people are most likely to listen to radio at home. So remember that in your media plans. And podcasts are one of the greatest new opportunities that we're seeing across the world in terms of growth. So think about how you can share your brand ideas, learnings, information, etc. via this new medium. In terms of creative, we do advise tread carefully if you're demonstrating anything that the government has asked us not to do. Okay? Food and alcohol, there are there's the potential to step out of line. So just check your creative assets, make sure you aren't demonstrating these large gatherings, weak hygiene habits, etc. And, don't offer any overseas holidays right now. It's just not relevant. So this is the time to look back at your assets and reuse them if they're more relevant. And just ensure that your communication is really fitting the moment. Are you relevant right now? We saw a number of people jumping onto the social distancing brand logo. This generally had a hit, a kickback from social media where people are saying this is just a spend of money that doesn't really add any value. Those that are shown to be responsive, like KFC took off all their finger licking ads, were perceived as being listening to what's the need of the moment. And those that are really making a positive difference to society, JBC Castle Lara, who have donated all their marketing spend to the Solidarity Fund over this period. People are responding well to that. And wherever possibly true to your purpose. This is a lovely execution coming from Dove, who have always had their purpose as authentic beauty. And they took photos of people, caregivers from around the world, and the impact of using the protective wear. And just a beautiful execution of relevant and very fast to action, agile. They had this on very soon, and I think just true to who they are. And just a reminder and a call out that, brands are not just about ads. Your brand experience can be one of the most impactful touch points in terms of driving your ROI. And we see that 75% of impact can be from non-media paid touch points. That's your customer experience. That's how people talk about you. If they see you behaving wrong, it's how it spreads on social media. So just be very conscious. Are you being consistent throughout your touch points? And we're seeing that there's a good opportunity to maximize your non-media touch points and adapt your customer experience. We've seen, brands like Web Africa who are experiencing unprecedented demand, just being very real with customers, telling them that they are going to experience slowdowns. They've introduced new channels, but they're being realistic with people and helping to set expectations that people can understand. So wherever you can, make sure you're making yourself as digitally accessible as possible. Getting through to call centers, especially when people are working from home, just isn't great. So other channels, being open to do that. Making sure you're listening to social media. There's many fantastic tools that allow you to do that, to listen and respond. If you aren't doing that, I would recommend that you are. And this can also help really drive positive word of mouth. And wherever possible, make sure that you're bringing digitally relevant experiences where appropriate. Okay, let's move now to how we get our products to people. And we really are seeing a huge acceleration in omnichannel. 22% of South African shoppers saying they're already shopping online. People who were afraid to give it a whirl have actually stepped out and tried something new. Brands like OneCart, Zilzi, Bottles, all these apps are seeing unprecedented growth. OneCart in the first couple of weeks saw a 300% growth. It crashed many of these websites because demand to have stuff delivered to you has gone through the roof, particularly amongst upper-end consumers. And I think the retail industry have really been very proactive and agile, and they have introduced a number of new measures to both get their products to customers as well as protect their customers. We've seen Spar offering personal shoppers, Pick n Pay offering drive-through WhatsApp shopping, pensioner hours. They've formed a new partnership with Bottles to deliver their products, etc. Checkers has introduced a number of services too. You can get the ShopRite and Checkers ShopRite group. You can get the ShopRite grocery vouchers online. They've got priority checkouts for elderly, and the Checkers 60-minute delivery has really been growing through the roof. There's many days where you just can't get a slot because there's so much demand. So very agile and really responding to what people need. When it comes to actually going to the stores, what we're seeing is people are staying very local. Even before lockdown, we already saw these numbers coming through that people are trying to avoid crowds. They're taking care. They don't want to make wrong choices. So your initial brand building initiatives here are making sure that they choose your brand. But please make sure you are able to meet the demand so that people aren't trying other brands during this period. And what we're seeing is an acceleration of people paying more attention to where the products come from. They don't necessarily want stuff from China. They want stuff that they feel is safe and locally produced. So for us, the immediate battle is about your availability and agile supply, but we do need to prepare to have better omnichannel strategies to get through post-recovery. So these are just 4 points that we recommend you follow, and you can go through those later. Okay, in closing, I just want to chat about how do we respond as businesses. What we know is it's not necessarily the strongest that survives, it's the one that's most adaptable. And how are you building your teams to deal with adaptability, to feel connected with one another, and to try new ways of working? Because it is going to be about speed. It's not about big beat small. It's about those that are the fastest to respond and being better than their competition. And we do a large survey in terms of understanding what successful companies, those that are getting overperformance, do. And they are far more focused on having competitive agility, having really strong competitive internal connectivity, teams that feel closely connected, that are multidisciplinary, that work together through issues, and are happy to do these agile sprints and things like that. They're very conscious about bringing diversity to decision-making, making sure that their teams are not all like-minded. And they are focused on bringing ever-evolving experiences and adapting to the changes in consumer needs and wants. So we do feel you need to be more focused on developing consciously agile ways of working, because this change is likely to be with us for a while. And there's going to be, even if we come out of lockdown, I think that we're going to be prepared to be working differently for a number of months to come. Finding active ways to build those cross-functional teams and break down silos in our businesses, and absolutely focus on building our e-commerce capabilities. In closing, I just love this quote from our CEO at Kantar South Africa, Ivan, who says, this is really a time for us to just step back and to reimagine, repurpose, reevaluate, and just respect all. This virus does not see income, color, creed, nothing. It hits us all, and we need to come together to reimagine, create, and grow together. So I leave you with 4 action points that you can do right now. Review all your existing executions and media choices. Anticipate a change in the value equation and what you can do to respond to that. Really look at some of these shifts we've shown you. These consumer worldviews have been shaken. What does this mean for your category? Get your teams together, debate it, brainstorm it, and develop those action plans. And lastly, we really encourage you to embrace omnichannel. Make sure your touch points accelerate the ability to get your products and services online, and really be open to new collaborations and partnerships that will help you drive growth. And that's all I have as thought starters, and we'd love to really hear your questions. So I hand over back to Silas.
Thanks, Karin, and what a wonderful presentation. I think it was very informative. I have been looking at the Q&As, I have been looking into the chats, and I have picked up a number of questions. And please, guys, I will encourage you to keep on sending those questions. But we may, for the sake of time, I would shoot on to some of the ones that have come through. So, Karin, in your opinion or in your view, you have spoken about up to 5 shifts. Would you say these shifts are temporary? If so, how long, or are they permanent?
So I think some of those very fundamental ones, like the shared value, the collaborative stuff, are going to be with us for a while. Some of the more short-term things, like I can't buy clothes, I can't eat at a restaurant, are likely to be more temporary. But we need to remember that all of them will be affected by tighter budgets for customers.
Okay. And, you know, you used a great concept, or rooted in the concept of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And, you know, the suggestion is that, or the observation is that products and services that talk to self-actualization and self-esteem needs are, are taking a back burner. Do you think, again, is that the death of them, or will we see a resurgence of them? What is your view on that?
So, I mean, I doubt that we'll see the death of any category, but I think there'll be pressure on some of those categories at the top end. So it's about, how do those categories respond, and how do they demonstrate to the market that they are listening, and find ways that maybe, many of the insurers, for example, that at the top end are already offering discounts to customers. They are finding ways that you maybe could ensure those things that are only the most essential to you, recognizing that people are going to be under pressure and they are reevaluating what's important. So I think it's for each category to sit down with their teams and to say, okay, so this is what we know. What does this mean for our business? And work through those actions. Mm-hmm.
And, when we started, we spoke about social distancing, now lockdown, and extended lockdown. How do you foresee consumer behavior once the lockdown has been lifted?
Yeah, so I think there'll be some things where people are just so ecstatic to be out and about that I'm sure beer sales will go through the roof in the first moment, as they did just before things closed down. But I think in a lot of other areas, there's going to be just a higher level of being considered, and just sort of some things are just shaken, and people are going to reevaluate some of their choices. And So I think we need to be cognizant of that.
Okay. And perhaps if you may allow me, the opportunity to respond to Ditsekwa, who says, any tips on marketing services like insurance, which are viewed as grudge purchases? This crisis could make insurance a hard sell in times of financial difficulty. And with my experience, around selling or marketing a service like insurance, I would say to D, now more than ever is the time to demonstrate value, value proposition. Yes, nobody walks around thinking, I need to be speaking to my broker, I need to be talking about insurance. But it is now even more pertinent as our needs for security, financial security, making sure of the right choices and really providing for the future. It is actually an opportune time for maybe services like insurance, which are not necessarily sexy services to sell. And here's a question, Karin, from Patiswa. Runs a BTL activations company and finding different ways to engage with customers without physical contact has become challenging. Not sure about how we pivot our business into the future. That's a really challenging.
I mean, obviously, right now with social distancing, it's a particularly difficult period for you. But I think, again, if we've got an exponential mindset and an agile way, how can we pivot what we do? And I've seen, if we can get that online conversation going more viral, getting people involved in helping us co-create new solutions. And, there's so many tools that you can get that to happen at scale if you use things like AI. I've seen some great examples like how government has embraced AI to respond to people around all the health concerns, the UIF claim concerns. So I think it's about just suspending your existing agenda and really thinking out the box.
And I guess also it's fair to say, in as much as online is becoming the go-to platform, things like radio, mediums like radio, which we know are one, destination medium, two, they've got a far more reach than many of than many of other mediums. They will be seeing a resurgence in terms of
Absolutely.
the mediums, the mediums to use. You can create stories.
Absolutely.
You can create plays, you can create promotions. So definitely we need to reevaluate them.
And I think the wonderful thing about radio is, radio reaches all homes in South Africa pretty much. And people have a relationship with the DJs. They have a trust with their favorite radio station. And when it comes to information at the moment, brand messages, just health messages, there's a lot of doubt and fake news. And what something like radio, which is that trusted, long-standing relationship that you have with your favorite radio stations, this is an opportunity to benefit and to use the trust that these national and local stations have to get your messages across.
Yeah, and I mean, there's fascinating questions coming through, and we might not be able to answer all of this, but definitely the presentation will be made available, the video will be made available, and we will be providing all of those links. But I just want us to continue taking some questions from the Q&A session. So what do you think? What do you do if your product is now just irrelevant, such as a travel agency? Any tips, any view?
Yeah. Well,
I think around the travel and the tourism industry.
Yeah, I think one of my very good friends is a travel agent, and she owns a bed and breakfast. And let's just say it's not an easy time. Unfortunately, you are going to be hit in the near term, and I think there's going to be doubt around travel for some time to come. But I love what SA Tourism has been doing to respond in this time, where they've been helping people to imagine places that maybe they'll go to, in a year's time or something. I think there'll be an opportunity for local travel because people are going to feel safer to take that short left and just stay closer. And I actually think relative to the rest of the world, South Africa will become a safer place. So I think it's tough. You may have to reinvent yourself as a travel agent and do something else as a service in the interim, because travel is going to be unfortunately hit for a while.
Yes.
Just in terms of being hit as a business, GIBS has also partnered with Kantar in terms of doing a business impact survey. And if you follow this Twitter handle below here, Kantar AME, you can see that link. And we would really love to hear from all of your businesses in terms of what actions you're already taking. And then GIBS will share those learnings with those that participate in the survey.
And then here's a difficult one, but also a very pertinent one. People have, a couple of questions have come about to say, how soon do you think brands can start with their hard sell or a retail job without being seen as being insensitive or being tone deaf? I know we have touched, I know we have touched on messaging. I know we have touched on the timings, but I think, for the sake of this being such a prevalent question, maybe you may want to emphasize some points there.
Yeah, so I think, assuming it's a consumer goods company that may be asking the question, I think it's how do you hustle with that little bit of value, just giving that little bit of extra, multi-packs, connecting with something else, finding ways to get it to customers in a more affordable way, just being a little bit astute as well. People are happy that they want to see that you are meeting their needs. They want to see that business is going to continue, and they want to see life going back to normal. They want that sense of safety and security that they just don't have at the moment. So I don't think we should be afraid to hustle. We just need to be very conscious of the tone, that we don't come across as, I don't know, just lacking any sensitivity to the situation.
I mean, there has been examples from a number of restaurants, from the number of, or rather restaurant chains, like the Roman pizza one. I mean, they have been continuously advertising. Yes, so granted on online channels, but the message has been, this will pass soon, and we are looking forward to serving.
And it's like, we still appreciate you, we're thankful for you, we understand what you're going through, and just staying emotionally connected with their customers. I think that's good.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't make sense for them to be talking about specials, to be talking about but it's about, we are here for you, we are in this together. And come back,
it's the higher level comms that we want to see going out rather than the transactional comms. I think also when it comes to restaurants, we're seeing a lot of globally some nice initiatives in terms of far more local. So especially in the near term, as people come out of, how do you team up with your local newspapers, your Caxtons, your to really become more local and support those that have really been affected in your area. Uber has done sort of local Uber Eats specials where people can buy local and support those that are in their area. So I think there's an opportunity to be more local in your approach and really tap into that community feeling that people are really understanding at the moment.
Cool. And then there's another one, because the government inevitably has to come to the party. What is your view of government's communication on the country's COVID-19 response? Is it effective?
I think that on a certain level, it's been relatively effective. However, this is my personal opinion. I think that there's a lot more to be done to reach people beyond, those that are in the top end areas, to really help people to understand, to communicate in a more relevant languages that are more relevant, far deeper, using perhaps healthcare workers and others that people really trust to get these messages out there. I think it's a really big job to be done, and they're heading in the right direction, but there's still a lot to be done.
Okay. Yes, indeed, very informative. And for the sake of time, I'm just going to put you on the spotlight.
Wow.
We've spoken about a lot of shifts, things that people can consider, things that people should be doing, and from the volume of questions in here, some of which we should be revisiting again, there's a lot of information that's being needed there. There's a lot of apprehension. Are things going to be the same? Are things going to be, the way it is? And marketing and communication plays a critical role in terms of demand creation. So the last question is, in South Africa, and specifically within the marketing, communication, advertising space, do you think we've got the know-how, the talents and the capabilities to really respond to this very well.
Silas, absolutely. I promise you, I am inspired literally on a daily basis with just the agility I've seen. I have a little PowerPoint file, which I keep and update almost every day, of the little things that people are doing just to pivot the way they do things, throwing out, their existing sacred cows, things they would never consider before, to really respond and do things differently and embrace the new. I've got lovely, lovely ideas, and I think our marketers are doing an incredible job under very tough circumstances. So I definitely think we've got the talent.
Wow, that really certainly gives me hope in terms of things to come.
Yeah.
Okay. To all.
So just in terms of maybe one last point from my side, is this Kantar, we're doing this update survey across the world every 2 weeks. And we're responding, adapting the questionnaire as we go to, the new realities as people find themselves in it. So we'll be happy to share some other learnings with you as time goes by.
Okay, cool. To everyone that has tuned in, unfortunately, we cannot take all of the questions, but we'll definitely make sure that we answer to all of those ones that go along with the certain themes. But from myself, Silas, GIBS family, and from my co-host, Karin, thank you very much. And we will see you on the next GIBS Flash Forum. Thank you.
Thank you.